First observer Carl's crystalline appendages trembled as they adjusted the quantum receivers for the third time in what humans would call an hour. Something was wrong with the equipment. It had to be. The patterns flooding their monitoring stations defied everything known about sentient communication. Most High Observer, Junior Analyst Verith's bioluminescent patches pulsed with urgent blues and greens. The signal persists. It's getting stronger. Carl's compound eyes shifted through spectrum bands, analyzing the data streams. The HFY monitoring station, hanging in the void at the edge of the hegemony space, had one purpose: to watch for threats. For 10,000 cycles, they'd monitored the electromagnetic emissions of countless developing worlds. They'd cataloged every possible variation of early spacefaring civilizations' attempts at communication. Mathematical sequences, binary pulses, gravitational wave experiments. But this was different. "Play it again," Carl commanded, their crystalline forms refracting light in patterns of authority and curiosity. The chamber filled with the alien transmission. It started simple enough, a regular carrier wave, crude by hegemony standards, but then came the content, and Carol felt their crystalline matrix vibrate in response. "Hey sis, happy birthday. I know you're probably busy doing important astronaut things up there on the ISS, but I couldn't let your big day pass without sending you a message. Remember when we used to dream about the stars in our backyard?" The voice belonged to Dr. Emily Anderson, though the HFY had no way of knowing this yet. What they did know was that the transmission was causing unprecedented reactions in their monitoring equipment, and in themselves. "Analysis," Carl demanded, trying to maintain composure as strange sensations rippled through their crystalline form. Verith's response came in stuttered pulses of light. "The species appears to communicate through. This seems incorrect. Compression waves in their atmosphere, converted to electromagnetic signals. Highly inefficient. But the patterns." The junior analyst's lights dimmed momentarily. "The patterns contain something our translators can't quantify." Carl understood, beyond the simple meaning of the words, which their advanced systems could decode easily enough. There was something else. The way the pitch changed, the rhythm of the sounds, tiny variations that seemed random but produced effects that rippled through their very being. "There's more," Emily's voice continued through the quantum receivers. "I put together a little playlist for you. Some Bach for your morning workout, Queen for when you're doing your experiments. I know how you love to rock out in Zero. And of course, Dad's favorite Sinatra for when you're looking down at Earth during your rest period." Music flooded the monitoring station. The effect was immediate and profound. Verith's bioluminescence began pulsing in sync with the rhythm of Bohemian Rhapsody, a completely involuntary response that would have meant immediate quarantine if any higher authorities were present. Carol found themselves experiencing something unprecedented. Their crystalline appendages were generating harmonic resonances with the music, creating subtle rainbows that danced across the station's walls. It was beautiful, dangerous, and absolutely forbidden. "Containment protocols," Carl managed to broadcast, their patterns showing both regret and fascination. "This signal meets criteria for Class 1 cultural contamination. We must." They never finished the sentence. A new sound had begun playing. Frank Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon." And for the first time in their long existence, Carol felt something wet form in their compound eyes. "Emergency transmission to the Council of Primary Species," Carl announced, their patterns now showing colors that had no name in their language. We have encountered. They paused, searching for the right classification. "We have encountered something beautiful." The alert went out across the hegemony's vast network. Within moments, the greatest minds of 1,000 species would begin analyzing this transmission. They would deploy their most sophisticated tools, their most advanced theories. None of them would be prepared for the way a sister's birthday message, carried on primitive radio waves from a supposedly backwater planet, was about to change everything. Dr. Jack Morrison was having a perfectly normal Tuesday until the aliens kidnapped him. He'd been walking across Harvard's campus, coffee in one hand and a stack of xenolinguistics papers in the other, when the air shimmered like heat waves over hot asphalt. One moment he was worrying about his upcoming lecture on theoretical alien communication patterns. The next, he was standing in a chamber that looked like the inside of a giant opal. "Please remain calm, Dr. Morrison," came a voice that somehow reminded him of wind chimes in a thunderstorm. "Your expertise is required for matters of galactic security." Jack dropped his coffee. It hung suspended in midair, defying gravity. He reached out to touch it, but a crystalline appendage gently pulled his hand back. "My apologies for the dramatic extraction," said First Observer Curl, their form shifting through colors Jack's brain could barely process. "But time is of the essence. We are experiencing an outbreak." An outbreak. Jack's academic mind was already racing, cataloging every detail of his surroundings. Of what? Carol's response was to activate a holographic display. The chamber filled with data streams, and then, "Is that Whitney Houston?" "The contamination spreads," Carl confirmed, their crystalline form vibrating with what Jack would later learn was emotional distress. 3 sectors have already reported cases of involuntary rhythm acquisition. The Enchtheri embassy had to be quarantined after the entire staff began engaging in synchronized movement to something called the electric slide. Jack fought back a laugh, which turned into a cough when he saw the severity in Carl's compound eyes. "You're telling me that Earth music is causing a galactic pandemic of dancing?" "Worse," came another voice. A new alien emerged, this one seemingly made of shifting shadows and bioluminescent spots. "We are experiencing feelings." The way they said feelings made it sound like a terminal diagnosis. Jack watched as the alien, who introduced themselves as Senior Xenolinguist Verith, brought up more data. "Observe this transmission," Verith said, their spots pulsing in distress. "Our most advanced quantum processors cannot explain why the combination of these sound waves produces liquid excretion from optical organs." The chamber filled with the opening notes of "I Will Always Love You." Jack watched in fascination as Verith's bioluminescent spots began to synchronize with the music's rhythm, and Carl's crystalline form started to generate harmonic overtones. "That's not a weapon," Jack explained, struggling to maintain his professional composure. "It's an expression of love, longing, and love." Carl interrupted, their form shifting to a deep blue. "We are familiar with reproductive imperatives, but this creates sensations that serve no evolutionary purpose." Jack spent the next 3 hours trying to explain the concept of music to a panel of increasingly agitated alien scholars. He broke down rhythm, harmony, and melody into their component parts. He diagrammed the physics of sound waves and the psychology of emotional response. Then something extraordinary happened. One of the alien scholars, a being that looked like a living aurora borealis, began to hum. The sound rippled through the chamber, mixing with the crystalline harmonics of Carl's form and the bioluminescent pulses of Verith's spots. They were making music. "Emergency," Carl announced, their patterns showing clear alarm. "We appear to be engaging in unauthorized artistic expression. Security protocols dictate." "Wait," Jack interrupted, an idea forming. "You said you needed to understand our transmissions. Maybe this is the key. Music isn't just communication, it's connection." He pulled out his phone, which somehow still worked in this impossible space, and pulled up his playlist. "Let me show you something we call jazz." The next 12 hours would go down in galactic history as the Harmony Incident. Jack Morrison, a professor who'd spent his career theorizing about alien communication, found himself conducting the first interspecies jazz ensemble in history. Carl's crystalline harmonics provided a baseline that would have made Miles Davis jealous, while Verith's bioluminescent improvisations created visual effects that defied description. By the time the Council of Primary Species burst in to contain the situation, it was too late. The revolution had a soundtrack, and it was spreading faster than light across the stars. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the hegemony, an urgent memo was being drafted. Warning: human music not classified as weapon. Classification pending. Current hypothesis: art. Lieutenant Jessica Jazz Thompson hadn't expected to become a galactic sensation when she started streaming her late-night piano sessions from her cramped New Orleans apartment. The most she'd hoped for was maybe making rent from her regular viewers. Sure, there had been some weird comments lately, strings of incomprehensible symbols and glowing dots appearing in her chat, but she'd chalked it up to bots or internet glitches. She definitely hadn't expected her ceiling to dissolve into starlight one night mid-performance. "Please," came a voice like chimes in the wind. "Continue the harmony configuration." Jazz's fingers froze on the keys of her grandmother's old piano. Above her, where her water-stained ceiling should have been, floated what appeared to be a living constellation of purple-green light. "You're not from around here, are you?" she managed to ask. The constellation pulsed. "I am Third Resonance HFY. I have traveled 16 light-years to experience what my people call the blues in its natural habitat." A pause, then. "The hegemony has declared your broadcasts illegal in 3 sectors. There is a price on the heads of anyone caught distributing recordings of your Giant Steps performance." Jazz looked at her piano, then back at the alien. "You came to Earth for jazz. Your jazz has caused a crisis in our society," Third Resonance explained, their lights shifting to a melancholic blue. "Our species communicates through precise, predetermined patterns of light and energy. But your music, it creates patterns that cannot be predicted, yet somehow form perfect harmony. It defies our understanding of communication itself." In the streets below, Jazz could hear the familiar sounds of the French Quarter at night. A saxophone wailed from one corner, while a trumpet answered from another. It was the kind of beautiful chaos that had shaped her entire musical life. "That's kind of the point," she said, turning back to her piano. "Here, let me show you something my grandmother taught me." She began to play, starting with a simple blues progression. The alien's lights pulsed in sync with her left hand's steady rhythm. Then her right hand began to improvise, and the alien's patterns became increasingly complex, trying to follow the unpredictable melody. "This is inefficient," Third Resonance observed, yet their lights continued to dance. "Chaotic, beautiful." What neither of them knew was that Jazz's stream was still running. Across the galaxy, underground clubs were pirating the signal. On a dozen worlds, beings of crystal, light, and stranger stuff gathered in secret to watch a human and an HFY discover how to make music together. In a high-security spaceport bar on Proxima, a group of smugglers had rigged up a crude device they called a jazz box. It captured and replayed human music broadcasts, becoming the hottest black market commodity in 3 spiral arms. The hegemony's attempts to crack down only made human music more desirable. "The harmonic corruption spreads," reported a desperate hegemony security officer to the council. "We caught an entire hive of Zagathili attempting to recreate something called the Lindy Hop. Their crystalline structures have been modified to produce what they called swing." But it was too late. Jazz's impromptu duet with Third Resonance became the anthem of a movement. Species that had never deviated from their prescribed communication patterns for millions of years were suddenly experimenting with rhythm, with melody, with the dangerous idea that communication could be art. The HFY declared Jazz their harmonic messiah, much to her embarrassment. "I just play what feels right," she tried to explain to an assembly of alien diplomats who had materialized in her apartment during her Tuesday practice session. "That is precisely why it matters," Third Resonance explained, their lights forming patterns that somehow looked like musical notes. "You have shown us that perfection can emerge from imperfection, that beauty does not require rules." Jazz just smiled and turned back to her piano. Above her, the ceiling remained a window to the stars, and somewhere in the vast darkness between them, countless beings were learning to make their own kind of music. The revolution had found its rhythm, and it was pure jazz. The grand chamber of the Council of Primary Species was designed to prevent emotional contamination. Its quantum-locked walls filtered out all unauthorized wavelengths. Its air was purified of any mood-altering spores, and its very geometry was calculated to maintain absolute rational clarity. None of that mattered when Counselor Vesnen activated the forbidden transmission. My fellow beings, Vesnen's crystalline form pulsed with what could only be described as nervous determination. Before you vote to quarantine Earth, you must understand what we are attempting to suppress. The other council members shifted uncomfortably. Some dimmed their bioluminescence in disapproval, while others extended sensor arrays in reluctant curiosity. "This is highly irregular," announced High Counselor Zixrel, their form a rigid lattice of disapproval. "The human sonic patterns have been classified as." "I have a dream." The voice rolled through the chamber like thunder, each word carrying weight that transcended mere sound. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, preserved across decades and now broadcast across light years, filled the sacred space of the hegemony's highest authority. "I have a dream that one day." The effect was immediate. Species that communicated through spores began releasing patterns that hadn't been seen in millennium. Crystalline beings started generating harmonic overtones that made their forms shimmer with impossible colors. Even the High Counselor's rigid lattice began to vibrate in resonance with the words. "This is not merely sound," Vesnen declared, their own form pulsing with the speech's rhythm. "This is not weapon or wasteful emotion. This is truth carried on waves of air, given power not by technology, but by conviction." "Contamination," shrieked one of the elder counselors, their electromagnetic emissions going haywire. "Security protocols must. Let freedom ring." The words echoed through the chamber, and something unprecedented happened. The High Counselor's crystalline form began to weep light, an impossibility that would be recorded in 1,000 historical archives. "How?" they asked, their rigid patterns dissolving into chaos. "How do they create such power with mere atmospheric vibrations?" Vesnen moved to the center of the chamber, their form now radiating colors that had no name in any hegemony language. "Because humans understand something we forgot eons ago. Emotion is not inefficiency. Art is not waste. They are the forces that move mountains, that bridge the vast dark between stars." In the corridors outside, members of the Listeners, a growing underground movement dedicated to preserving and sharing human broadcasts, were staging their own revolution. They broadcast everything. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, John F. Kennedy's moonshot speech, Churchill's finest hour, and 1,000 other moments when human words had changed the course of history. The hegemony's communications network, designed for precise and emotionless data transfer, was overwhelmed by the flood of human expression. Across 1,000 worlds, beings who had never known art were awakening to its power. The motion to quarantine Earth, the High Counselor began, their voice wavering with unfamiliar emotion. "Is." They never finished. From the depths of the chamber, a sound emerged that shattered 10 million years of protocol. The High Counselor was humming, a perfect match to the cadence of Dr. King's speech. One by one, other council members joined in. Species that had never made music found their voices. Beings of light and crystal and stranger stuff began to merge their alien sounds with the human words still echoing through the chamber. Vesnen watched in awe as the Council of Primary Species, the most rigid institution in known space, transformed into an impromptu core. They sent a private message to their human contacts. "The revolution has reached the heart. There can be no turning back now." In the days that followed, the hegemony would try desperately to maintain order. They would declare human broadcasts a Class 1 cultural contaminant, implement strict thought quarantine protocols, and even attempt to create damping fields around entire sectors of space. But you can't quarantine an idea. You can't suppress a song. And across the galaxy, beings who had never known art were learning a new truth, that the simplest human words, carried on primitive sound waves, could shake the very foundations of the stars themselves. The revolution had found its voice, and it was speaking in every language the universe had ever known. Commander Mike Reynolds had spent 15 years in the Space Force preparing for first contact. He'd run every simulation, memorized every protocol, and trained his squadron for scenarios ranging from peaceful greeting to hostile engagement. None of those scenarios had prepared him for aliens doing formation dancing to Leonard Skynyrd. Shadow 6 to command, he transmitted, watching the massive crystalline ships pirouette through space in perfect sync with the guitar solo from Sweet Home Alabama. Please confirm you're seeing this. Command sees it. Shadow 6, came the response, tension evident even through the military crisp transmission. Can you confirm there? Headbanging. Through his cockpit window, Mike watched as the alien vessels, each roughly the size of an aircraft carrier, bobbed in a way that did indeed look remarkably like headbanging. Their crystalline surfaces caught starlight and scattered it in rhythm with the music that was somehow broadcasting on all frequencies. Sir, his wingman's voice cracked slightly. They're sending a new transmission. The music changed. The opening riff of Johnny B. Good filled their comms, but it was unlike any version Chuck Berry had ever played. Alien harmonics wove through the familiar notes, crystalline overtones, and bioluminescent pulses merging with guitar and piano to create something entirely new. And then, between the notes, words. Greetings, humans. We come seeking. A jam session. Mike's training warred with his instincts. First contact protocols didn't cover impromptu concerts in high orbit, but before he could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. This is First Observer Carl. The transmission resonated with crystalline harmonics. We apologize for the theatrical entrance, but we believed it important to demonstrate our appreciation of your culture. Mike watched as one of the crystal ships transformed, its faceted surface rearranging until it resembled a massive electric guitar floating in space. Command. Mike transmitted, requesting permission to respond in kind. There was a long pause. In the background of the command channel, he could hear heated discussions about protocols, security risks, and international implications. Finally, Shadow 6, you are authorized to proceed. Try not to start an intergalactic incident. Mike grinned and reached for his personal tablet, thankful he'd never listened to his superior officers about keeping his music collection off his spacecraft's systems. Shadow Squadron, form up on me. Let's show our new friends how we really do it in Alabama. What followed would be remembered as the Orbital Orchestra Incident. 6 Space Force fighters, led by Commander Reynolds, engaged in what could only be described as a synchronized space ballet with the alien fleet. As Sweet Home Alabama played across all frequencies, human and alien ships wove through the star-studded darkness in an improvised dance of technology and art. Watching from their crystalline bridge, Carol turned to their second-in-command. The hegemony was wrong. They are not primitives playing with radio waves. They are artists who have turned the very void between stars into their canvas. On Earth, every telescope and radio dish was pointed skyward. Social media exploded with videos of the light show visible from the ground, as alien crystals scattered starlight in time with human music. #SpaceJam began trending worldwide. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. All vessels involved in the unauthorized artistic expression are hereby ordered to return for decontamination and rational restoration. But Carl's response, broadcast across all frequencies in both standard communications and power cord, was simpler. Rock and roll is here to stay. As Earth's diplomatic corps scrambled to establish official protocols, and military commands worldwide went to high alert, Mike Reynolds and his squadron continued their dance with the stars. Human and alien, technology and art, mathematics and music, all spinning together in the vast darkness of space. Shadow 6 to new friends, Mike transmitted, unable to keep the smile from his voice. How about we take this party planetside? I know some folks in New Orleans who've been dying to meet you. The alien ships pulsed with colors that somehow managed to convey excitement, and in that moment, looking at the Earth floating below them, everyone involved knew that the universe would never be quite the same again. First Contact had a soundtrack, and it was pure rock and roll. Marine Corps Colonel Amanda Riff Martinez stood before the hastily assembled United Nations Security Council, her electric guitar slung across her dress uniform. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as diplomats whispered about the unprecedented situation. "With all due respect, Madam Secretary," Martinez said, her fingers unconsciously running over the guitar's strings. "Traditional diplomatic protocols won't work here. These beings don't communicate through memorandums and diplomatic notes. They communicate through—" She struck a chord that somehow felt both military precise and rebelliously wild. The chamber's air shimmered, and suddenly they weren't alone. First Observer Carl's crystalline form materialized beside Martinez, while Counselor Vesnan's aurora-like presence filled the opposite side of the room. The assembled diplomats gasped, reaching for translation devices that would prove useless. "Your Colonel Martinez is correct." Carl's form pulsed with harmonics that made the water glasses on the delegates' tables sing. "We have studied your traditional diplomatic methods. They are insufficient for what must come next." Martinez nodded to her fellow officers stationed around the room. Each revealed an instrument hidden beneath their formal uniforms. A violin here, a trumpet there, even a full drum kit that somehow materialized behind General Thompson. "The hegemony sends battleships," Vesnan announced, their lights forming complex patterns. "They believe they can quarantine your world, silence your art. We propose a different approach to First Contact." Martinez smiled, positioning her fingers on the guitar's fretboard. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Security Council, with your permission, I'd like to present Earth's first official response to the galactic community." Before anyone could object, she launched into the opening riff of an old Earth song. But this was no ordinary performance. Carl's crystalline form began resonating with harmonics that shouldn't have been possible, while Vesnan's auroral display pulsed in perfect rhythm. The other military officers joined in, their traditional instruments blending with alien sounds in ways that defied physics. The Security Council chamber transformed. Diplomatic barriers dissolved as music bridged the gap between species. Chinese diplomats found themselves swaying to crystalline harmonies. The Russian delegation's stoic facade cracked as auroral lights danced to human rhythms. The American ambassador was caught trying to teach a group of minor alien delegates how to do the electric slide. "This," Carl announced between movements of what could only be described as an interstellar symphony, "is true diplomacy. Not the exchange of words, but the sharing of souls." Outside, Times Square had become an impromptu concert venue. Alien ships hung in the sky, their crystalline surfaces reflecting and refracting the city's lights in time with the music flowing from street performers below. In Central Park, a Exethery light choir was attempting to learn New York, New York from a group of street musicians. The hegemony's response arrived mid-performance, a fleet of warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel with weapons charged. But they hesitated when their targets didn't run or fight. Instead, Martinez turned her amp up to 11. The resulting power chord, amplified by Carl's crystalline resonance and carried on Vesnan's light waves, rippled across space. The hegemony ship's crystalline components began to vibrate in sympathy, their weapon systems automatically recalibrating to match the frequency. "You cannot stop this with force," Martinez transmitted to the hegemony fleet, her guitar still singing. "Music isn't a weapon or a weakness, it's a bridge. So what do you say?" She launched into a new riff. "Care to join the band?" One by one, the hegemony ship's formations shifted. Their crystalline structures began to pulse with color, joining the impromptu concert. The hardened military commander of the fleet would later insist that their ships had been contaminated by human rhythmic warfare. But witnesses noted they were the first to start playing what sounded suspiciously like a bass line. As the music spiraled up toward the stars, Martinez turned to Carl and Vesnan. "Think the galaxy's ready for what Earth has to offer?" Carol's crystalline form shimmered with what could only be described as laughter. "Dear Colonel, the galaxy will never be the same, and that is precisely what it needs." The Embassy of Sound was officially established that day, though no formal documents were ever signed. Instead, the agreement was sealed with a jam session that lasted 3 days and could be heard all the way to Alpha Centauri. The revolution had found its embassy, and its ambassadors spoke in the universal language of music. The hegemony's last-ditch effort to contain Earth's influence began with the quarantine of an entire sector. It ended with their own security forces humming Taylor Swift songs during the operation. "Sir," reported Commander Vixtol of the Hegemony Security Fleet, their crystalline form vibrating suspiciously in rhythm, "we've lost contact with the containment vessels in Sector 7. High Commander Zarek's electromagnetic patterns flared with frustration. "Explain." "They're not disabled, sir. They're—" Vixtol's form shifted uncomfortably. "They're attending something called a concert." In his makeshift laboratory aboard the International Space Station, Dr. Jack Morrison watched the chaos unfold alongside his alien colleague, Zexera. The station had been transformed into an impromptu research center, its walls now lined with equipment that analyzed both sound waves and alien neural patterns. "Look at this," Jack said, pointing to a holographic display where complex patterns danced. "Every time we play Earth music, these dormant neural pathways in various species' brains light up like Christmas trees." Zexera's bioluminescent spots pulsed with excitement. "It's not just music, Jack. Watch what happens when I play them this." The lab filled with the sound of children laughing. On the neural displays, entire networks of alien brains blazed to life. Regions that had been dormant for millions of years of evolution suddenly crackled with activity. "We didn't lose these capabilities," Zexera whispered, their spots forming patterns that somehow looked like tears. "We buried them. In our pursuit of perfect, emotionless efficiency, we locked away the very things that made us truly alive." Below them, Earth had become the galaxy's greatest concert venue. Ships from 1,000 worlds hung in orbit, their crews finding ways to bypass the hegemony's increasingly desperate restrictions. Street corners in every major city had become impromptu cultural exchange centers, where humans taught aliens everything from breakdancing to barbershop quartets. But it wasn't just art that was spreading. People were starting to notice other changes. Hazitexthali crystal beings spent 3 hours laughing with a human child over soap bubbles, their crystalline form refracting the rainbow patterns in ways that made both species see new colors. A Nxitheri light core discovered they could use their bioluminescence to tell stories, not just transmit information, leading to the first alien-human theater production, a surprisingly moving rendition of The Phantom of the Opera. And in the great archive halls of the hegemony, ancient records began to surface. Evidence that long ago, before the drive for perfect efficiency, alien species had their own arts, their own music, their own ways of touching hearts across the vast dark between stars. "They're mobilizing the Rationality Fleet," Jack noted, watching tactical displays track massive hegemony ships moving toward Earth. "Looks like this is it." Zexera's response was to pull up another neural scan. "Look at the hegemony ship cruise patterns. Even as they approach to enforce emotional quarantine, their brains are changing. They can't help but respond to human broadcasts. You can't unknow beauty, Jack. You can't unfeel feeling." The hegemony fleet arrived with the sunrise, their ships casting shadows over Earth's major cities. They brought their most powerful emotion-dampening technology, their strictest rational enforcement protocols. They were met with music. From every radio telescope on Earth, from every speaker in every city, from countless alien ships in orbit, the same song played. Humanity's collective heartbeat, carried on waves of sound and light and stranger things. It wasn't a weapon or a defense. It was an invitation. One by one, the hegemony ship's crews felt something stir in minds that had known only cold logic for generations. Neural pathways dormant for millions of years blazed to life. And in that moment, they remembered what their species had forgotten. That efficiency without emotion is like a universe without stars. The revolution wasn't just cultural anymore. It had become evolutionary, awakening ancient capabilities that had been buried beneath eons of rigid control. Jack looked at his alien friend, seeing the play of emotions across their bioluminescent form. Think they'll ever forgive us for making them feel again? Zahira's patterns formed what had become recognizable as a smile. My friend, they'll thank us for reminding them they always could. The paradigm hadn't just shifted, it had evolved, and there was no going back. Tyler Soundwave Williams never imagined his DJ career would lead to him becoming humanity's first galactic cultural ambassador. Yet here, he stood in the newly expanded International Space Station's observation dome, watching Earth rotate below while alien ships danced in orbit like fireflies around a cosmic campfire. Ready to make history, Ambassador? Commander Mike Reynolds asked, floating beside him in his dress uniform, now modified with symbols representing both Earth and their new galactic allies. I was born ready, Tyler replied, his fingers dancing over his holographic mixing console, a hybrid of human creativity and alien technology. Though I still think it's wild that my first diplomatic action is dropping the hottest mix the galaxy has ever heard. The console hummed to life, connecting to the largest broadcasting network ever created. Every radio telescope on Earth pointed skyward, ready to transmit. Every alien ship in orbit prepared to relay the signal. This wasn't just a celebration. It was humanity's gift to the stars. This is Ambassador Williams, he announced, his voice carried on waves of light and sound to every corner of known space. Earth presents to the galaxy the archives of human expression, and we're gonna start this right. His fingers flew across the console, and the first notes of Ludwig van Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the cosmos. But this wasn't just a recording, it was something new. Crystal harmonics from Carol's people wove through the orchestra. Anx-theory light patterns danced with the chorus. 1,000 alien voices joined the ode to joy in a harmony that transcended species. From his political asylum aboard a rebel hegemony ship, Counselor Vesnan watched neural pattern displays light up across the galaxy. Look, they said to the assembled refugees from rational control, every mind touched by this music remembers. We all had songs once. We all had stories. We just forgot how to sing them. In Austin, Texas, the newly established Galactic Cultural Cooperative Headquarters was hosting its first open mic night. The lines stretched for miles. Beings of crystal, light, energy, and stranger stuff, all waiting for their chance to share their rediscovered voices with the universe. Lieutenant Jazz Thompson had been promoted to Dean of the First Interstellar Conservatory of Music, where she taught crystalline beings to swing and light forms to scat. Music isn't just about making sounds, she told her alien students. It's about making connections. Dr. Jack Morrison and Sexera published their groundbreaking paper on the neurological renaissance, how human art reawakened galactic consciousness. It became the most transmitted scientific work in known space, though critics noted the unusual presence of poetry in the methodology section. Back on the space station, Tyler's mix reached its crescendo. Batch blended with bioluminescent choruses, jazz merged with crystalline harmonics. Rock and roll made quantum physics dance. Each piece was a bridge between worlds, each note a reminder that beauty knows no species barrier. The hegemony believed efficiency was everything. Carell observed, their crystalline form refracting starlight in rhythm with the music. They forgot that the most efficient path between hearts is a song. The final transmission from the former Council of Primary Species was brief. We hereby dissolve in favor of the Galactic Cultural Cooperative. The age of pure logic is ended. The age of harmony begins. As Tyler's mix faded into a soft blend of whale songs and stellar harmonics, he looked at the earth below. You know what's crazy? He said to no one in particular. Our first message to the stars wasn't some fancy math or advanced physics. It was just a sister saying happy birthday to her sister. Just humans being human. That's exactly why it worked. Amanda Riff Martins replied, her guitar floating beside her. We didn't give the galaxy technology or weapons or power. We gave them something they didn't even know they'd lost: their souls. The celebration lasted for weeks. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had forgotten how to celebrate remembered. Art that had been buried for millions of years resurged in new forms. The galaxy remembered how to dream, how to dance, how to feel the music in the spaces between stars. And it all began with a simple human transmission, carrying on primitive radio waves the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever encountered: the power to touch hearts across the infinite dark and make the very stars themselves sing. The revolution was complete, and the universe had found its voice again.